approach this topic with fear and trepidation. Not so much because of the topic itself, but issues relating to sexuality tend to divide people. Shocking, I know. Take for example the subject of gay marriage. If someone were to ask you what your stance is, more often than not the question isn't about your opinion on the subject. It's more of a political sorting hat to know if you are of the tribe or not. And this is true for multiple sides of said debate. Sexual topics are touchy by nature, no pun intended. This is particularly true when it comes to issues of sexuality in video games. The community of gamers tends toward the socially liberal, sexual libertarian side of things, and so-called traditional morality in terms of sexuality is often frowned upon, to put it lightly. But if there's one thing all sides seem to agree on is that romance in games tends to be, well, lacking. Whether it's the lack of believable relationships or the silly interaction with potential love interests, video game romances tend to fall short of their cinema and literature cousins. This video is titled The Bioware Romance because the development studio Bioware is known for crafting RPGs with rich world building and characters. We've mentioned them a few times here on the channel, and their games have sold a modest amount according to my research. But here, more than any other series, is where the issue of video game romances tends to fall flat. Having thought about it for a bit, I think these are the reasons why this is the case.
Characters in orbit.
One of my main criticisms of RPG games with one main character is that the other characters tend to orbit around the main character. What I mean by that is other characters tend to wait until the main character does something before they do anything. It's more reactive than active. I heard a saying that has really stuck with me about supporting characters. Write your supporting character as if they think they are the center of the story. Strong supporting characters have their own motivations for doing things. They should have lives outside of the main character. Instead, with weak characters, they react rather than take any agency. This is particularly an issue for romantic interests in games. These characters, more than anything else, need strong traits and clear definition. Yet too often, while they have defining traits, they also seem to be entirely reactive to the player's advances when it comes to romance. This is a sore point for a lot of people. The characters who are potential love interests require the player to do all the work in the relationship, from initiating conversations to giving gifts to slaying a dragon who's your love interest's mother. Yeah, sometimes it gets a little weird. But basically, the player is the one doing all the work. Real relationships have a natural balance to them, even if each individual person in a relationship thinks they're the ones who are doing all the heavy lifting. I found this is true even for characters that I found to be more defined as being proactive. For example, Isabella in Dragon Age 2, I felt, was a character that had her own agenda. You can see her when you talk to other characters just leaving, for example. She's always up to something. But even with her active persona, it still requires the player to initiate everything about the relationship. Every conversation with her in this matter requires the player to initiate it, even though she clearly is the type of character that would take a much more actionable role in her other pursuits.
Silly interactions.
It's one thing that the heavy lifting in building a relationship in the game is on the player. It's quite another that the way one goes about this is suspect in most games. Too often the romancing aspect of the game is simply picking the right things to say. In the latest Bioware games, the romance dialogue option is clearly marked out. Romancing an NPC is often little more than choosing the person in question and checking off a list of dialogue options and straightforward tasks. And that's the most normal aspect of romancing in gaming. Things get even sillier when gifts are introduced into the equation. If the game has any kind of romancing meter or some display to show how the person feels about you, more often than not you can game the system by tossing random gifts their way. Did you kill your love interest's father? Here's a diamond. Now let's talk about that whole love meter thing for a sec. Yeah, I know it was helpful for times when the game isn't communicating information in a clear fashion, but it's a kind of gamey thing that pulls you out of the moment. On the other hand, I think guys would love to have a meter above their wives' or girlfriends' heads. I had no idea the word fine had so many nuanced meanings for women. Dragon Age Origins is the most egregious offender of this one. You can basically placate anyone with gifts regardless of what other things you've done. Here's a gift or something, all is forgiven.
Like dating a robot.
This one is a bit tricky because we can only go so far with NPCs in game writing. But if there is one thing that I find is missing from gaming romances is the element of the unknown. Or to put it another way, there is a direct and correct way to win the affection of the fictitious love interest. That way is always set in stone. There is no mystery to these characters for the most part. Romancing a character in a game is straightforward. The methods might be a bit different, but the application and the results are the same from game to game. I think the most obvious indicator of that is that there are very few memorable romances that the player participates in when it comes to gaming. Or at least in my experience, I cannot recall a romancing option that was memorable, except for the fire-breathing mom dragon killing. Yeah, that did make an impression. As stated, what I'm really criticizing is that there is no tension of the unknown. Romancing someone is about getting to know the person and finding compatibilities and all kinds of things that make no appearance in a lot of gaming romances. Finding out what they want and learning if the two are compatible. As a result, there's no real challenge in gaming romances. The lack of agency combined with superficial interactions of NPCs means that the romances aren't really believable. The NPC you are wooing is easily convinced, and the romancing begins almost as soon as you choose the romancing option. One only needs to consult AAA RPGs where romance is an option to see this. Since this video focuses on Bioware games, we can choose any game from either Mass Effect or Dragon Age. In every game, in either series, this trend seems to hold up. Your character, for the most part, knows the right thing to say at the right time in the conversation. There's no challenge here. Off the top of my head, you could at least have a minigame of sorts where your love interest, by way of conversation, forces you to recall if you were paying attention to the conversation. It's an organic and relatable way to reinforce a relationship. And since this is deterministic, those lazy bums who use walkthroughs can still cheat their way to romance.
Insignificant other.
Finally, we have what I think is a major issue with how relationships are handled in games. Once the romancing has concluded, usually via relations, that's a gripe I'll save for another time, the NPC in question seems to become less significant, not more. The relationship aspect seems to fade into the background rather than signal the next stage of the relationship. Part of this, I suspect, is due to the fact that any number of romance NPCs can fill the slot, and it's this interchangeability that causes a real issue for making the relationship feel significant. Instead of the love interest being the most important person to the player's character, they tend to fall into the friends with benefits category at best. The importance of the love interest seems to fade after the achievement is earned, another thing I'm going to gripe about at some point. The person in question might get some mention at the end of the title and narratively has some significance, but this is usually done in post-final battle exposition rather than in scenes that the player gets to see. One of the most important relationships the player character has is relegated to the background after the important work is done. This is even more apparent how the narrative is structured for sequels. The relationship that one worked toward in the last game is often written out so that the player can romance another. This even further trivializes that relationship, as it shows that such relationships have little to no lasting impact. One would think the hero might take a game off or two from romancing just to figure out why his relationships don't work out. I'm a bit harsh on Bioware in this video, as their games tend to manifest these trends in their worst forms. But to be fair, this is a problem across gaming in general when a player character has the choice to romance another character. The interchangeability of romance options actually tends to trivialize romantic relationships rather than create the emotional weight such relationships have in other mediums. It's a real shame as well, because I think video games have the ability, like books, to really draw you into the moment. In games, especially narrative-driven games, there is almost an expectation to be able to spend time with characters you find interesting. Side quests, optional dialogue, and random banter in your party is almost an expectation at this point. But when it comes to romance, these characters tend to get the wrong end of the deal. I think there's a lot more reasons for the sorry state, but that's enough for now. We'll explore this topic in more detail with further discussion videos. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.